This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Over 25 years helping leaders reducing errors and incidents. Here is your host of the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, Rob Fisher.
Welcome to the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast. I'm your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher, President and Director of Operations for Fisher Improvement Technologies. We've spent the last 25 years helping organizations and individuals understand how and why people make mistakes, especially mistakes that could prove to be catastrophic, and how you can either prevent those mistakes, reduce the probability that a mistake happens, or mitigate the consequences of those mistakes. The Essential Leadership Cycle podcast is here to provide leaders information, insights, methods, and tools to ensure a highly reliable, sustainable, and resilient organization. Most of the podcasts will contain a story and then some things for leaders to try on their own. We're also going to feature some special guests to share their experiences. I've been involved with discussions, mentoring, and coaching and consulting to everyone from New York major international CEOs and board members to frontline supervisors and field workers, and everyone in between. I want to expose leaders to the characteristics of intentional leadership that we've developed based on over 250 deployments, over 100 major companies, 40 countries, and 10 languages. The Essential Leadership Cycle podcast is an opportunity for leaders to hear how they can use intentional leadership concepts to improve performance using human performance, or HP, HOP, human and organizational performance, quality, lean, safety differently, and advanced error reduction. FIT has more than 250,000 students globally, and our personality diversity partners in Equilibria have over 600,000 data points related to how individuals with different personalities see and manage risk. As one of the original developers of the practical application of human performance, or HOP, principles and tools, I bring a unique perspective on where human error reduction and performance improvement started, where it has been, and where it's going. And I want to be able to share that with you. You see, I've always known that personality has something to do with how organizations and individuals see and manage risk. And over the years, I certified in most of the major personality trait profiles, whether it was Myers-Briggs or DISC or Robert Rome, Florence Littauer. But it wasn't until Chevron in San Joaquin Valley, their leadership introduced me to Louis Sr., the CEO of Equilibria. And we both saw that a combination of what we knew about human and organizational performance and what they knew from personality diversity tendencies and risk could be combined and integrated to improve the probability that leaders in the workforce will recognize and manage risk with lower vulnerabilities to the workforce, assets, and organization. We've now incorporated Equilibria's 8 essentials of leadership into what we call the Essential Leadership Cycle, as a way for leaders to understand their impact on performance improvement and what they can do to ensure a positive impact. You see, as a leader, if you use models, your workers will use models. If you use systems, your workers will use systems. And most importantly, if you use processes and programs, your workforce will use processes and programs. This is actually a learned behavior. And that learning starts with managers, starts with senior leaders. Before we had the essential leadership cycles, managers and senior leaders could really get away with not having to do a lot for human and organizational performance or performance improvement. A lot of things were pushed down to the workforce. But the essential leadership cycle actually gives the leaders the ability to use models to do the things they need to do. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and describe the essential leadership cycle and its elements and interaction, just so you know what we'll be revisiting. You can always go look on our website and get a copy of the essential leadership cycle to reference. And I know we're in a medium that just requires a lot of listening, but I want to share each of the elements. And what I'm going to do over the next few podcasts is approach each one of those elements and the way it interacts with the other elements. So picture a cycle where you start with self and team awareness. Self and team awareness then leads to shared vision and values, which leads to clarity of roles and processes. If you have good self and team awareness, good shared vision and values, and good clear roles and processes, which, by the way, most organizations, if you just ask the leadership if they have those things, they will tell you yes. But only a few probing questions asked about those three will define whether that organization really does have good self and team awareness, shared vision and values, and clear roles and processes. If you have those three, it leads or starts to generate trust in the organization. That trust then allows the organization to be diverse and inclusive in the way they perform their business. It allows them to use diversity, physical diversity, gender diversity, religious diversity, looks diversity, and diversity and inclusion of thought. Once you have those elements, then people will start to make commitments that are theirs. They're not demanded commitments. They're commitments that the people offer up because they believe in what you're doing. The next step of the essential leadership cycle is accountability. And you notice that accountability is quite a ways around the essential leadership cycle. We'll revisit that in a little while. And then the last element of the 8 essentials in the essential leadership cycle is learning and continuous improvement. So again, the essential leadership cycle is self and team awareness, shared vision and values, clarity of roles and processes, trust, diversity and inclusion, commitment, accountability, and learning and continuous improvement. So using the essential leadership cycle as a system is going to generate better outcomes. Those better outcomes will be generated because when the leaders understand the essential leadership cycle, when they understand the task-based system, that leader knowledge can then convey into leader language and behaviors. Those elements of leaders changing their paradigms and those paradigm changes, changing leader language and behaviors, will be seen by the workforce if you engage properly. Rather than asking the workforce to merely start changing their language and behaviors because you tell them to, start changing your language and behaviors and then engage with the workforce on those things that you are doing different, those things that you have learned differently, those things that you are saying differently. So today, you can actually start to change the way you talk about success and failure. These will start to lead to better outcomes, a better version of your culture, your values, and your norms. The first thing you should try to do is stop asking why things happen. There's no reason for a leader to ask why something happened, especially in the first 48 hours. You all have the capability to do analysis of your incidents. That's where all of the whys come in. Start asking, how did this happen? And then be quiet and listen to what people say. Let that be an engagement where you are helping to discover how things happen. How did it play out? When you ask how instead of why, you're not backing people into a corner. See if you don't start getting different information in different ways almost immediately when you ask people, tell me what happened. Tell me how it happened, instead of why did you do something? It's almost damaging to an organization when the organizational leaders, all the way down to the first line supervisors, ask the question why. The whys will be figured out, but they'll be figured out better if you understand how it happened and you understand what happened. Next time on the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, we'll visit the first attribute of the cycle, self and team awareness. This has been your host, Rob Fisher. Thanks for listening, and remember, intentional leadership starts with you.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.